The original Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was absolutely legendary.
If I think to my favourite Call of Duty games, COD 4 is easily the best.
All in all, Call of Duty World at War is one of the best COD games out there.
I've said this once and I'll say it again, nothing will compare to Black Ops 1 or 2, whether...
What the bloody hell is that? Incoming missile!
Call of Duty has been on a steep decline over the past decade in the eyes of its fan base. When you ask someone, what is your favorite Call of Duty game? The most common replies are typically COD 4, Modern Warfare 2, or Black Ops 2. You'll very rarely hear the title of any Call of Duty released in the past 10 years come up in that conversation. This is for a multitude of reasons that I'll be breaking down throughout today's video. But before we can truly pinpoint the reasons behind it all, we must first understand what made Call of Duty such a popular franchise in the first place. World War II has always been a topic of intrigue inside the entertainment industry. Movies like Saving Private Ryan, Dunkirk, and Pearl Harbor are all extremely good examples of the World War II setting being extremely popular amongst consumers at the time. So naturally, when video games were starting to become popular, this would also become a setting many franchises would use to their advantage. The Call of Duty franchise was no different, starting out as a simple World War II shooter all the way back in 2003. At the time, the original Call of Duty was competing with popular franchises like Wolfenstein, Battlefield, and Medal of Honor, who were all doing the exact same thing. However, despite Call of Duty being a completely new game with little backing that was being made by a very small group of indie developers, it would manage to capture a sizable audience for the time, selling 4.5 million total copies. Call of Duty did so well because the game had managed to take the World War II setting popularized by the games before it and made a much better version than arguably anyone else. It had a campaign and multiplayer which aren't jaw-dropping by today's standards, but if you put them in the context of the time period, it was honestly a great experience. Yes, there could have been more weapon choices. Yes, the campaign could have had better narratives with better written characters, but what more could you ask for in 2003? You have to keep in mind that this game was made before I, and likely many of you watching, were even born. And trust me, the team at Infinity Ward would take all the criticisms they received after the release to heart when developing both Call of Duty 2 and 3, both of which brought exponential improvements to the base formula that the original had created. Call of Duty 2 marked the first time a Call of Duty game released to console, which would become extremely important for the survival of the series. It made most of the iconic modes of the franchise like Team Deathmatch, Capture the Flag, Search and Destroy, and Headquarters, and it introduced a much better campaign compared to the previous title. Call of Duty 3 was a similar story. It brought more improvements to the game's campaign and continued to improve on the multiplayer formula of the series. This proved to everyone who played the games back then that the people behind Call of Duty were able to innovate and continually improve with every new title that came out. This helped to build their reputation and caused them to become pretty respected in the first-person shooter genre. However, despite the insane growth they have managed to see over the past 3 games, it was nothing compared to what the franchise would manage to accomplish with the release of COD 4 in 2007. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare was released in 2007 to amazingly high ratings and critical acclaim, and it is widely considered by many to be the best game in the entire franchise. This is due to the game's campaign being packed to the brim with amazingly well-written characters, a good narrative, and a modern setting that bundled it all together. This was vastly different to campaigns of the previous titles because instead of including 3 different smaller stories into one game, COD 4 focused all its campaign into one story. But we need to keep in mind that in 2007, a lot of people still weren't connected to the internet, and so a game's single-player mode was crucial to its success in the industry. And since Modern Warfare had managed to innovate so drastically compared to its competition with the graphics, characters, and storytelling, it allowed the game to succeed beyond Infinity Ward's wildest dreams. However, what kept a lot of players coming back for more was the multiplayer. With the release of Xbox Live and PlayStation Network, the developers at Infinity Ward saw an opportunity. And with Halo 3 proving that online multiplayer on console was a viable and thriving subset of gaming, Infinity Ward decided to work extra hard and put a lot of resources into refining the multiplayer experience. These refinements included the new create a class system, the introduction of new game modes, a new progression system that allowed you to unlock the iconic gold camo, the introduction of kill streaks to the franchise, and much, much more. It's pretty clear that Infinity Ward put a lot of effort into the system. The difference between COD 4's multiplayer and COD 3's is astonishing, and this major difference was extremely apparent to fans, leading to the game being praised for many years for its incredible innovations to the series, and it consistently being at the forefront of people's minds when Call of Duty is brought into the conversation. COD 4 is still put at the top of tier lists by most fans today, which is crazy considering it was made all the way back in 2007.
I think I have to go S.
Jump for it all the way to God tier. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is 100% deserving of the God tier status.
So COD 4 is next in line there. COD 4 was really good. It was really good for its time. It still is pretty good now, I would say.
The next two entries in the series would also manage to innovate massively and see huge success. Call of Duty World at War, while it was another World War II game, it managed to bring the new formula to the time period. The multiplayer is praised to this day for being the best World War II multiplayer in the franchise due to it using the same great mechanics established in COD 4. The campaign was also really good and held up to the high standards that COD 4 had set. The campaign had characters like Reznov, who would become an important part of future Call of Duty campaigns. It had some truly iconic missions and set pieces, and the ending of the campaign started what to many is the most important part of Call of Duty, the Zombies mode. Trust me when I say the Zombies mode would become a crucial hallmark of Treyarch's games moving forward, and it would add a ton of replayability to the Call of Duties that had this unique mode. Even World at War, a game released in 2008, is still played today by the Call of Duty Zombies community, which goes to show how important this mode was for Treyarch's games. Then the introduction of Modern Warfare 2 in 2009 managed to break sales records for the franchise, bringing even more eyes to the series. These sales numbers weren't for no reason either. The game's multiplayer was a perfect continuation of the COD 4 formula, introducing some of the best and most iconic maps in the franchise, having an amazing weapon selection, and it built on the game modes laid out by the previous title. Additionally, its campaign did a great job of moving the Modern Warfare story forward, introducing some of the most iconic missions in the entire franchise. However, after the release of Modern Warfare 2, another iconic game in the Call of Duty franchise would be released that would take the world by storm. Call of Duty Black Ops 1 released on November 9th, 2010, and this game surpassed what many thought was possible for video games at the time. Its campaign was insanely good, arguably the best Call of Duty campaign ever created. It introduced iconic characters like Alex Mason and Frank Woods. It was set in the Cold War, which hadn't been done before in a Call of Duty game, and it offered some of the best storytelling in the franchise. The game's feats didn't just stop here though. It also had an amazing multiplayer that rivaled that of the Modern Warfare series. Black Ops introduced Create a Class 2.0, more customization to weapons and profiles, wager matches, new kill streaks, and a whole new weapons arsenal. These new features and new content helped to make Black Ops stand out from the crowd, and it led to a huge debate in the community over whether the Black Ops series or Modern Warfare series was superior. But the addition of the Zombies mode from World at War on top was the icing on the cake. Even though in 2010 the internet was becoming more and more common, it was still important for games to offer a good offline gameplay experience for its non-internet connected fans to enjoy. Well, a great campaign definitely helped with this, but the Zombies mode provided the offline fans a replayable experience. This is how I and many others were introduced to the franchise. I didn't have Xbox Live back in the day, and so I would go over to my friend's house and play split-screen Zombies. This mode allowed for so many new fans to get their hands on the game and to actually have an experience that they could sink hours into. This concept is directly reflected in the ridiculous sales numbers Black Ops reached, that being over 30 million copies. This was an insane record that wouldn't be surpassed for a decent amount of time. This is because the next title in the series, Modern Warfare 3, would be the first game to truly cause some controversy in the Call of Duty community. Modern Warfare 3 was controversial because it felt like it could have just been a DLC to Modern Warfare 2. Very little was changed on the multiplayer side of things besides the addition of some new maps and weapons, and on the campaign side, it was just the conclusion of the already established Modern Warfare story. Now, don't get me wrong, this game was not bad by any means and is still considered to be one of the best in the series. It made some decent improvements as well. But a lot of people at the time felt like the game was just not as good as the previous Modern Warfare games due to the lack of innovation. However, the next title would turn everything around and would manage to become arguably the best Call of Duty game ever released. Black Ops 2 was released on November 12th, 2012, and on release, it was a massive hit, grossing over $500 million in the first 24 hours after its release, meaning that it broke the world record for the biggest entertainment launch in history. And it would sustain this record until GTA 5 managed to surpass it, which speaks volumes to how good this game really was. The game had an amazing campaign that successfully continued the Black Ops storyline. The multiplayer was my favorite in the entire franchise, and the zombies mode was pretty good as well. There were some issues with it, like the fact that Transit is probably the worst zombies map ever released, but I think the multiplayer is able to carry it heavily. And clearly a lot of people agree since the game was an insane commercial success. If you ask someone what their first Call of Duty game was, most will either say Black Ops 2 or Black Ops 1, which goes to show how good Treyarch knocked it out of the park with these games. However, the release of Black Ops 2 marked what many considered to be the peak of Call of Duty, because after this, Call of Duty would begin committing what I call the 3 deadly sins of gaming. Those sins being greed, pandering, and laziness. So strap in, because we're about to go deep into the reasons why Call of Duty's downfall truly began. The next release of Call of Duty would come in the form of Call of Duty Ghosts. This game was immediately disliked by a large number of fans on release. This is because the campaign was widely criticized for being lackluster, especially compared to the previous games it was up against, and the multiplayer made sweeping changes like replacing fan favorite game modes with new ones, which alienated current fans. It also didn't help that the new maps and the side mode Extinction were considered to be some of the worst in any game in the franchise. Also, the marketing was notoriously awful, with them putting a huge amount of emphasis on the addition of canines to the series. The only good thing this game managed to introduce to the franchise was sliding, which would become a necessity in most COD games moving forward. I would say that Ghosts was the beginning of Call of Duty's reputation going downhill. The terrible reception of this game left a lot of fans with a very pessimistic outlook on what was to come, because if Ghost was this bad, they couldn't imagine what could be just around the corner. However, despite this game being received horribly by most fans, it still sold well, and at least the game was disliked due to its actual mechanics and not any predatory practices laced throughout. However, that was all about to change, because the next Call of Duty would begin a controversy in the COD community that would last nearly half a decade. On November 3rd, 2014, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare was released. Upon arrival, it was immediately apparent that the game had some massive flaws. A lot of people didn't enjoy the multiplayer due to it being an advanced movement game. The skill gap was huge, which led to a lot of casual fans of the franchise not enjoying it as much. The game was also criticized for having an all-over-the-place map design. Some maps were designed well for the advanced movement, and then others felt like you could get away without using the movement at all. Additionally, the campaign was so bad that it was memed across the internet. I'm sure we all know of the F to pay respects meme. Yeah, that started in Advanced Warfare. And on top of it all, the game didn't even satisfy zombies fans due to the game's core mechanics like the new pack-a-punch system and EMP zombies feeling awful to play with. However, the game's main issue is its monetization. Around this time, Call of Duty went through a phase spanning a 5-year period that I like to call the phase of greed. Not only was Activision charging $60 for each base launch title and an additional $60 for all the DLCs, but they also introduced the worst mechanic ever added to the COD franchise. That being supply drops. Supply drops, in case you were unaware, were basically in-game slot machines that allowed you to gamble in-game currency and real-life money for your chance to win in-game items. And Advanced Warfare's rendition of these drops were extremely predatory. Advanced Warfare supply drops were filled to the brim with cosmetics and, more importantly, weapon variants and new DLC weapons. This basically meant that if you got lucky inside a supply drop, you would have a competitive advantage over everyone else who didn't open loot boxes. These loot boxes were optional either. If you wanted a new DLC weapon, you had to grind through the challenges to unlock supply drops, or you had to drop real-world cash to open them up. So basically, Activision was introducing gambling to their largely underage audience that had massive gameplay advantages available inside them. And this, by no means, was just a one-time thing. Call of Duty Black Ops 3 had them, and arguably worse. Infinite Warfare had them, Call of Duty World War II had them, and Black Ops 4 had them as well. And coincidentally, this period of Call of Duty is widely considered to be one of the worst time periods of the franchise. And the next entry that was about to release, Black Ops 3, wouldn't be able to turn things around in the slightest. November 6, 2015 marked the release of Call of Duty Black Ops 3, and it was immediately one of the most divisive in the franchise. A large amount of people love it, a lot of people hate it, and even more people just completely skipped out on the game due to Activision's reputation at the time. And you can't really blame them either. Black Ops 3's campaign was abysmal, and its multiplayer was mixed when it came to reception. I personally really liked the campaign, but I know a lot of people hated the advanced movement direction of the franchise. Also, the multiplayer did have a real monetization problem, just like all the other games of this era. Following the example Advanced Warfare set, all of the DLC weapons in Black Ops 3 were locked behind the newly introduced supply drops, and people would have to spend thousands of dollars to even think about obtaining these pieces of new content. The only thing saving the game was its amazing zombies mode, which was comprised of the best maps of the franchise and an absolutely amazing cast of characters. This mode was so good that it would be played by fans for years to come, and its modding and map making community is still going strong today, nearly 8 years later. However, this excellent zombies mode wasn't good enough to stop the huge amount of criticism Call of Duty was receiving at the time, and the next game will just keep making things worse. The announcement of Infinite Warfare in 2016 took the franchise to a steep decline by becoming the most disliked trailer on YouTube at the time. The announcement was received so poorly by the public that Activision decided to tack on a remastered version of COD 4 to the deluxe edition of Infinite Warfare to get more sales. And the bad reception wasn't for nothing. People absolutely hated the multiplayer in this game due to its overpowered specialist system and the terrible maps that were clearly not designed with advanced movement in mind. Also, the game's multiplayer once again followed the greedy tactics of locking DLC weapons behind supply drops, which would become a common criticism. Then for the campaign, it just kind of went under people's radar due to the last 3 campaigns in the franchise being terrible, and the zombies mode wouldn't be given the light of day until years after its release. To this day, when you ask the average COD fan what their least favorite Call of Duty game was, many will say Infinite Warfare due to its numerous flaws. However, I also think this game was a victim of timing. The last 2 Call of Duties were set in the far future with advanced movement mechanics. A lot of people were skeptical of this new direction for the series, and since Infinite Warfare was the 3rd game like this in a row, a lot of the player base wanted to make it known that COD should go back to its roots with a modern boots-on-the-ground shooter. However, Call of Duty wouldn't truly get this message until a few years after. This is apparent because the next Call of Duty in the series was World War II. World War II was mainly criticized for being another game in a time period that was overused, instead of being a game set in the modern day. People just didn't like going to this setting for the 4th time, and it didn't help that the title made a lot of changes like the addition of score streaks, the removal of sliding from the game, and the addition of the division system, which was hated by many multiplayer fans. Then for the zombies mode, it was so different from previous modes in the series that it scared a lot of people away. To this day, World War II is considered to have one of the worst zombies modes due to it being more horror focused. Then finally for the campaign, once again, it isn't really talked about much. The series at the time was producing the bare minimum when it came to the campaign side of things, so many just didn't care about the mode entirely, which Activision would try to use to their advantage in the next title, Black Ops 4, which was another absolute disaster. The game's multiplayer was absolutely ripped apart for its heavy reliance on teamwork mechanics, making it feel more like Overwatch rather than Call of Duty. But that wasn't the main issue with the game. Firstly, the game launched without a campaign at all, since Activision believed it wasn't important anymore, which made a lot of fans who lacked an internet connection irritated that this mode wasn't a gameplay option for them. Also, it made a lot of people wonder why the game even had the Black Ops name in the first place, since there was nothing tying Black Ops 4 to the rest of the series. I will say they did replace the campaign with the new Battle Royale mode Blackout, but this mode would quickly die after Warzone came out, and it wasn't updated that often. And since it wasn't free to play like Warzone, many Call of Duty fans have never even played the mode. Maybe if they made Blackout free to play instead of charging $60 for it, people would have actually ended up playing it. But since it was bundled into Black Ops 4, it was pretty much dead on arrival. Then finally, the zombies mode was heavily criticized by fans for being way too complex and making unnecessary changes to the core mechanics that wasn't necessary. Some great examples are reworking the pack-and-punch system, the perk system, and removing gobblegums. After making the best zombies game ever, Black Ops 3, many people had high expectations for this game, and since it drifted so far away from what made Black Ops 3 so great, it left many fans heavily disappointed. Now, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice a lot of these games, especially Black Ops 4 and World War II, felt the need to change core mechanics for no rhyme or reason, other than to make the game easier for newer players. Changes like the implementation of score streaks, heavy skill-based matchmaking, and terrible balancing changes made it easy for new players to stay in their own little bubble away from the rest of the world. And as time has gone on, these sort of problems have become more and more problematic. I think the release of Modern Warfare 2019 and Warzone are a great example of what I'm talking about. Modern Warfare 2019 was widely considered by many to be a step in the right direction for the series. The new movement mechanics created a lot of depth in the gameplay that otherwise wasn't there before, and the new weapon customization made for a lot of unique class setups that you could take advantage of. This inherently made the skill gap much higher and more difficult to climb compared to a game like World War II, which handheld the player throughout the entire process. And while there were definitely some issues with 2019, like the fact that the maps rewarded camping and that the skill-based matchmaking was still a heavy issue in the community, it was a step in the right direction in a lot of people's eyes. And with the addition of Warzone into the mix, Call of Duty was now competing with some of the biggest games out there like Fortnite, and seeing player counts unlike anything they had ever seen before. Warzone would actually become the main source of income for Activision for many years, and especially to start. People were absolutely in love with this thing. The great movement of Modern Warfare 2019, the slow time to kill, and the large weapon pool made for some absolutely great fun. Also, Warzone had the unique benefit of being free to play, which caused it to have a reach unlike Call of Duty ever had. This insane ability to reach newer players would be used to Activision advantage to sell future Call of Duty games by integrating them into Warzone. Black Ops Cold War was the first game after 2019 to truly take advantage of this, allowing the game to amass over 30 million copies sold, matching iconic games like Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2. And it was actually received positively overall due to its mechanics going back to the series' roots, allowing for the multiplayer to absolutely thrive. Also, its Zombies mode did a great job of appealing to the mass number of casual fans joining through the huge growth of Warzone. All of this made a lot of long-term fans hopeful that Call of Duty might actually be able to turn itself around and potentially save itself from the death most people foresaw coming just a few years ago. However, the next 3 iterations in the series would disappoint the community once again because Activision would commit the final sin, laziness. Call of Duty Vanguard was released on November 5th, 2021, and this game, in my opinion, was the final nail in the coffin that has sealed the series' fate in the eyes of the public. This game was clearly rushed out the door to meet deadlines. This is because the campaign was one of the shortest in the franchise. It had terrible characters and it lacked any iconic missions. Then on top of that, Treyarch was forced to be brought on to develop the zombies so they could release it on time, meaning that 2 studios were having to work on a single game at once. And don't get me started on the ridiculous number of controversies surrounding the game. The biggest one being the fact that the game did not stay true to the time period at all. If you want to watch a video breaking down every flaw with Vanguard when it comes to history, I'll link a 26-minute video by the Frosty one in the description. Because realistically, I don't have time to go over everything, and he made a great video on the subject. But just know that it was so distasteful that it was honestly downright disrespecting to the era. Also, the fact that the game's post-launch content, specifically for zombies, was rehashes of previous content from other games was unacceptable, and players made it known. But moving past all of these issues on the surface, a large majority of players hated the changes the multiplayer brought. Many of them criticized the game for being way too fast in comparison to even Modern Warfare 2019. The time to kill was fast, the movement was fast, and the attachments that boosted damage were absolutely busted. All of this criticism and hate that was thrown at the game mounted into being one of the most hated Call of Duties of all time, surpassing even Infinite Warfare in a lot of people's eyes. And I think the strong distaste for Vanguard by a large amount of fans explains a lot of the decisions they made regarding Modern Warfare 2022. As we all know, people fell in love with Modern Warfare 2019 due to the game's high skill gap and the amazing changes that it brought to the franchise. However, Modern Warfare 2 would not go over as well with fans despite it being a direct sequel to the fan favorite game. This is because it was decided that Modern Warfare 2's mechanics would be slowed down in comparison to the previous 3 CODs. They removed the ability to slide cancel, increased the time to kill to force people into playing safer, and they increased the amount of skill-based matchmaking once again. This ties into what I said earlier. Activision, after developing Warzone, knows that pandering to casual players is the best way to have a commercially successful game. This is why games like Fortnite and Minecraft are so popular, while From Software games and super competitive FPS games like Rainbow Six Siege are significantly less popular. Being able to hold an audience of people who have barely played video games can be huge for sales numbers, and things like a high skill gap and a lack of skill-based matchmaking will drive those players away since there will be inherent difficulty. However, these decisions have led a lot of more experienced players losing the want to play the game. Because what's the point in mastering a game you know is going to punish you for doing so? And the sucking up to the casuals doesn't even stop here. Activision has gone as far as to patent their own unique SBMM system that gives players with a lower KD, higher accuracy, and more damage. It is still speculation as to whether or not this system has made it into MW2 or is going to be in MW3, but I've seen a lot of videos that appear to be pretty damning. All I can say is the fact that we have to even consider this as a possibility shows how badly the franchise has shifted from its roots. Call of Duty used to be a franchise focused on pushing the genre forward and innovating, but nowadays they are focused on meeting deadlines and maximizing sales. I guess I shouldn't be surprised since they are such a big company at the end of the day, but it is disappointing. And seeing that Modern Warfare 3 2023, a game that was originally designed to be a DLC from MW2, is being released as a full-blown title for $70, it doesn't look like Activision is going to be changing this mindset. In conclusion, Call of Duty has been on the downfall for, in most people's eyes, the past decade. This is due to what I consider to be the three major sins that Call of Duty has committed. The first is greed, which began being present all the way back in Advanced Warfare with the introduction of loot boxes, and it's still present today with the decision to release MW3 as a standalone game. Then the second is pandering to new players, which can be seen in any modern Call of Duty game via their skill-based matchmaking, score streaks, and easier to learn core mechanics. Then their final sin, laziness, is a much more recent sin they've been committing, with examples being Call of Duty Vanguard and any recent Call of Duty game besides 2019. All of these decisions were made with one goal in mind: profits. And with Call of Duty being more and more concerned with their profit margins over the quality of their content, I expect the series to keep going downhill because their reputation has already been tarnished heavily. Anyways, that's going to wrap up today's video. I know a lot of you will be surprised to see a video like this on my channel, considering I've dedicated the past 2 years of YouTube towards Siege content, but I feel like it's time to start branching out. I plan on uploading similar videos like this for the foreseeable future. So if this is your kind of thing, I'd appreciate it if you guys would consider following me on this journey. If not, I completely understand. I know for a lot of you, you subscribe to me for Siege content, and so if it's time for you to move on, I understand. Now, if you want to watch another video just like this one, I'll be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you guys will enjoy. And hopefully, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.